All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at a really powerful, almost poetic argument for why one of our planet's most incredible creatures is so important. Now, this isn't going to be a dry scientific breakdown. Instead, it's a passionate plea from our source material that says elephants are absolutely essential, like you just can't have a healthy world without them.
So, right off the bat, our source hits us with this incredible metaphor. The whole idea is that the elephant is so fundamental to its ecosystem that its footprint literally holds the footprints of every other creature. It frames the elephant not just as another animal in the forest, but as the actual bedrock that the entire community is built on.
And you're going to see this phrase, Shivoham, pop up in the text. It's a spiritual idea from Hinduism, and it basically means I am Shiva, asserting a connection to the divine. Seeing it here is a huge clue that we're not just talking about ecology. This whole argument is pushing us to think on a much deeper, more philosophical level.
Okay, so let's really dig into this core idea. The source is arguing that a single elephant's footprint is the key, the absolute key to the freedom of every other animal living in that forest. The source presents this like it's a fundamental law of the wild. It's creating this direct link, a cause and effect relationship between the freedom of all the other animals and the presence of this one keystone species. So if freedom is what we're after, then elephants are the mandatory requirement. Now, what's so interesting here is the language. It doesn't say it would be good to have elephants or we should try to protect them. It says they are mandatory. That implies that without them, the whole system doesn't just get worse, the very concept of freedom for other animals just completely vanishes.
So, this brings us to the central problem. If elephants are mandatory, what on earth happens when they're taken out of the picture? Well, according to our source, the ecosystem doesn't just get a little weaker, it completely transforms into something broken, something like a prison.
This line gets repeated throughout the text almost like a haunting chorus, and it just paints this grim picture of a world gone wrong. The forest, which should be a symbol of freedom, becomes a place of confinement. The very rain that should bring life instead becomes the bars of a cage, trapping every creature inside.
But the source doesn't just leave this as a mystery. It asks the question directly, making us face the reason for this imprisonment head on. This isn't some random act of nature.
And there it is, the answer. It's blunt, and it's pointing the finger right at us. The source is saying, plain and simple, the forest isn't free anymore because of one deliberate human action. So the prison isn't made of iron bars. It's made of an ecosystem that's been completely thrown out of balance because its master architect is gone.
Okay, so if people are the cause, what's the motivation for this incredibly destructive act? The source zooms in on what it considers a totally unlawful and, frankly, trivial reason: human vanity.
This is the ethical core of the whole argument. The source asks us point blank, is it lawful? And by using that word, it's challenging us to think beyond our own legal systems and consider a higher natural law. Is there any moral justification for ending a life that significant for something as minor as home decor?
And this is just brilliant. It completely flips the script on us to make its point. The source reframes the whole question, asking us to imagine someone destroying our life for their decoration. By putting those two things side by side, it forces us to see the elephant's life as equal to our own, which makes justifying its destruction, well, pretty much impossible. The source makes the stakes crystal clear with this simple equation. This isn't some complicated domino effect. It's a direct one-to-one relationship. The act of killing an elephant is presented as being the exact same thing as destroying the entire forest. One single act represents the destruction of the whole. And now, the argument kicks it up a notch, from the ecological to the spiritual, circling right back to that Shivoham idea. The source starts calling elephants, and really all animals, godly creatures. And this introduces a really powerful concept of shared experience that makes our actions feel so much heavier.
So, what does it mean by godly creatures? Well, the most important part of this definition is the idea that happiness and pain are universal. It's suggesting that an elephant's capacity for joy and its ability to feel pain are no different from our own. And if that's true, any act that causes them suffering becomes a really profound violation.
And then you get the other side of that coin. If causing harm to these godly creatures is such a terrible act, then protecting them is presented as a divine act. The source lays out a clear moral choice. You can be a destroyer, or you can achieve a kind of godliness yourself, through compassion, by saving the vulnerable.
The text then kind of zooms out, pointing out that this destruction goes way beyond just elephants. It lays the blame on what it calls extra-minded humans, which is a fascinating critique, right? It's suggesting our unique intelligence has become a tool for harm, affecting literally every part of the natural world.
So here we are at the source's conclusion. It's a final, powerful plea that pulls together all these different threads, the ecological, the moral, and the spiritual, into one big call to action.
This is it. This is the ultimate thesis statement. And it's not a gentle suggestion, it's a command. Keep the Earth alive. And right after, it hits us again with that core warning, cementing it as the one thing you can't forget. The fate of the elephant and the fate of the forest are exactly the same.
And in what might be one of the most moving lines, the source seems to give the elephant a voice of its own. If I were, as in if I were just allowed to exist, creatures would live freely. It's such a simple, heartbreaking line that brings the entire argument full circle, right back to that initial promise of freedom.
And that leaves us with this final, lingering question. We started with the metaphor of the elephant's footprint holding up all the other creatures. The source wants us to stop and really think. What's left when that foundation is gone? What happens to a world when the very footprint it was built on has vanished forever?